pleased to have Brother Ethan Allen, and Ethan's here with his wife Sydney and his young son Declan. I hope you get a chance to meet them. We'll have a more in-depth introduction of him during the worship hours. I'm going to go ahead and give him all of his time right now. I'm going to be teaching our Bible class this morning. Give your best attention, and all yours.
Good morning. Hope everyone's having a good Sunday morning so far. What do you teach on the first time you're standing in front of a congregation? I don't have that answer, but we're going to look at a construction project this morning. I work in construction. That's my main job, and so it seemed to fit pretty well. So if you would turn with me to Nehemiah chapter 3, and that's going to be the text for our lesson this morning. All right, so I'd like to get 4 volunteers if I could, and we're going to split this chapter up, 8 verses apiece. Could I get 4 people to volunteer to read? All right, that's 3. I get 1 more. I can read the last verses. That's fine. All right then. I don't know everyone's name, but Jonathan, if you would start, and then the gentleman in the back there, what's your name, sir? I'm sorry? If you would take the next verses, and ma'am, if you would take the next 8, and then I'll take the final 8. Nehemiah chapter 3. First 8, yes, sir.
Then Elisha, the high priest, went up with his brothers, the priests, and they built the sheep gate. They consecrated it and set its doors. They consecrated it as far as the Tower of the 100, as far as the Tower of Hananel, and next to him the men of Jericho built, and next to them Zachar, the son of Imri, built. The sons of Hasaniah built the fish gate. They laid its beams and set its doors, its bolts, and its bars. And next to them, Meremoth, the son of Uriah, son of Hakaz, repaired. And next to them, Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, son of Mehezabel, repaired. And next to them, Zadok, the son of Manah, repaired. And next to them, the Tekoites repaired, but their nobles would not seek to serve their Lord. Joiada, the son of Pesah, and Meshullam, the son of Besodiah, repaired the gate of Yesanah. They laid its beams and set its doors, its bolts, and its bars. Next to them repaired Melatiah, the Gibeonite, and Jadon, the Meronothite, the men of Gibeon, and of Mizpah, the seat of the governor of the province beyond the river. Next to them, Aziel, the son of Herahiah, goldsmiths, repaired. Next to him, Hananiah, one of the perfumers, repaired, and they restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall.
And next to them, son of her, Bishop Jerusalem, made repairs. Next to them, Diah, the son of Jeremiah, made repairs in front of his house. And next to him, Hapshush, the son of Ashbenaiah, made repairs. Diah, the son of Marin, and Hashub, the son of repaired another section, as well as the tower of the ovens. And next to him, the son of Malash, leader of half the district's computers money. He and his daughters made repairs. And then it happened, so Noah prepared to delegate. They built it, hung its doors with its bolts and bars, and prepared 1,000 cubits of the wall as far as the fuse gates. Malachi, the son of leader of district of Beth Hacker, prepared the fuse gate. He built it and hung its door with its bolts and bars. The son of Moses, leader of this time, prepared the bottom gates. He built it, covered it, hung its doors with bolts and bars, and repaired the wall of the pool of Shalom by the king's garden, as far as the stairs that goes down to the city of David. After Nehemiah, the son of leader of the half district that served David as far as the David, as far as the house of Micah.
After him, the Levites prepared Recham, the son of Benai, next to him, Ashbiah, ruler of half the district of Lot, prepared for his district. After him, the Babai, the son of Henadad, ruler of half the district of Caleb, next to him, Ezra, the son of Jeshua, ruler of Mizpah, prepared another section opposite the ascent to the armory of the buttress. After him, Barak, the son of Ezra, prepared another section from the buttress to the door of the house of Eliashib, the high priest. After him, Merriman, the son of Uriah, son of Hakaz, prepared another section from the door of the house of Eliashib to the end of the house of Eliashib. After him, the priests, the men of the surrounding area, prepared. After them, Benjamin and Uzzah prepared opposite their house. After them, Azariah, the son of Isaiah, the son of Ananiah, prepared beside his own house. After him, Benui, the son of Henadad, prepared another section from the house of Azariah to the buttress and to the corner. Eliab, the son of Uzziah, prepared opposite the buttress in the tower projecting from the upper house of the king at the court of the guard. After him, Diah, the son of Rush, and the temple servants living on Ophel prepared to the point opposite the water gate on the east and the projecting tower.
No, you're good. You're fine. After them, the Tekoites repaired another section in front of the great projecting tower and as far as the wall of Ophel. Above the horse gate, the priests carried out repairs, each in front of his house. After them, Zadok, the son of Immer, carried out repairs in front of his house. And after him, Shemaiah, the son of Shechaniah, the keeper of the east gate, carried out repairs. After him, Hananiah, the son of Shelemiah, and Hanan, the sixth son of Zalaph, repaired another section. And after him, Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, carried out repairs in front of his own quarters. After him, Malchijah, one of the goldsmiths, carried out repairs as far as the house of the temple servants and of the merchants, in front of the inspection gate, and as far as the upper room of the corner. Between the upper room of the corner and the sheep gate, the goldsmiths and the merchants carried out repairs. And y'all can see, after listening to them read, why I did not want to read all of that by myself. This is one of those passages where it's brutal to get through, but there's a lot going on and a lot we can learn from it. But before we dive into it, can anyone tell me what is going on in Nehemiah right now? So Nehemiah was a servant of the king Artaxerxes, who was the son of Xerxes, during the captivity of the Jews. And he gets word that the city is lying in ruin. The wall has been taken down, the gates have been burned, and it grieves him. And so he prays, and he prays to God, one, for the forgiveness of the people, and he prays for God's help and for success as he goes to Artaxerxes. He's the cupbearer of Artaxerxes. So he goes to him directly, and he asks the king for permission to go and rebuild the wall of the city of Jerusalem. Not only does the king agree, but the king also grants him safe passage through the provinces to it, sends him guards, I believe, and also grants him lumber from the king's forest. So he favored Nehemiah in this regard, and Nehemiah, of course, gives that credit to God, as he rightly should. So he goes and he tells the Jews that are there, he says, hey, we need to do this. This needs to get done. We need to build this wall. And he inspires the Jews to get to work. And of course, as is the case with Israel and Judah, not everyone goes along with it. They take a lot of ridicule, and a lot of problems arise from this situation. But that gets us to chapter 3. And the people began building the wall, and that's what's going on here. Any comments or questions on that so far? Okay. So the reason that I chose this passage is threefold, but the first thing I want to look at is who is building the wall. Who's involved in this? And if you look at the very first verse, you see that Eliashib, the high priest, arose with his brothers the priests and built the sheep gate. They consecrated it and hung its doors. Now, I thought that was interesting because if you know anything about the priests, and particularly the high priest, building a wall is not something you would typically see them doing. This is not something that they would normally have been involved in, as they were considered the spiritual leaders of Israel at the time. So it was interesting to me that they were involved. Also, Eliashib is mentioned in a couple of passages, mostly just in passing. As he's identified as the high priest during this time, except in Nehemiah 13, where he is identified as providing a place in the temple for a man named Tobiah to stay, who was an enemy of Nehemiah, and Nehemiah condemns him for it and throws Tobiah out. So with that being all we really have to go on his character, I would say that it's a fair assumption to say that he's probably not a great guy, and that this was true of a lot of the priests and the high priests at the time, leading up to the captivity, during the captivity, and even after. So you've got a man who is a spiritual leader in Israel, not used to construction, and probably not the best example, but still he gets involved, and he and his priests build the sheep gate here, and later on you'll see them mentioned again. They build another section of the wall. And so I think that's a good lesson to us, that even those who may seem unqualified, or even those who may feel unequal to the task, can still get involved and get work done. Then the next group I wanted to look at is the Tekoites and their nobles. So the Tekoites are first mentioned under David. There's one of David's mighty men was a Tekoite, and they're mentioned a couple of times as being involved under the reign of David and after. And of course, there's the wise woman of Tekoa, who's mentioned as begging David to bring Absalom home, and that was a catastrophe. So they've got some good things mentioned about them and bad things mentioned about them. But here, they're mentioned as being involved in the construction of the temple. The reason that I thought it was interesting is it said that they were involved and that they were building a section of the wall, but their nobles did not support the work of their masters. So there was evidently some division going on here, and the nobles did not want the wall to be rebuilt. But they worked anyway, which I think is important, because just like the Tekoites, I'm sure, did, and I know Nehemiah and the rest of the people did, we face adversity as well as we go out to do the work that God has assigned to us. Not everyone wants to see the work done. Not everyone wants to be involved, and we will receive persecution for that. But it's important for us to see examples like this and to do the work anyway. Feel free to comment or question at any time.
yesterday was a great example of a work day where a bunch of people come together and accomplish things that probably a lot of us as individuals could have come up here on random days and did everything we did. But it's just easier when you see your brothers and sisters working alongside you. It's encouraging.
Yes.
So know if I get tired, I have to sit down, somebody else is going to continue to work, and it's not going to be. If I get tired and sit down and work by myself, that exact same job is still staring at me in the face, and I'm still discouraged to put my back into it.
Yes.
If I know that work is progressing while I'm taking a rest or I'm taking a break, and I see that work progressing, it gives me the encouragement to get back on my feet.
Yeah, many hands make light work, for one. It makes it easier, when you've got other people working with you who are willing to work and put forth the effort. And certainly, it gets discouraging when you feel like you're the only one working. And that's one of the great examples of this passage, is that everyone comes together and gets involved. And that's definitely a lesson that we could take, because we're going to discuss in a moment what they were able to accomplish. But are there any other comments or questions along that thought? I want to look at a couple of more groups. You've got Rephaiah, the son of Hur, and Malchijah, the son of Rechab. These guys were leaders. They were, I forget how it identifies them exactly, the word, but they were leaders of districts. Yeah, there you go. The official of half the district of Jerusalem. This was not a low man on the totem pole, per se. This was someone who had authority. And yet when Nehemiah comes and he says, we need to get this done, just like everyone else, he gets down and gets his hands dirty and builds a section of the wall. Same with Malchijah and several others that are mentioned, and it kind of demonstrates the diversity of those who worked, because we are not all the same. We don't all come from the same backgrounds. And we don't all have the same skill sets, but we can all get involved and get work done. This was not a man who would normally be involved in something like this. Matter of fact, I'd go as far as to say this would normally be a man who would be an overseer due to his position. But here he is getting his hands dirty along with the rest of them. And it is a testament to the unity of purpose that can be found in God's people and in the work that we do. And then I want to make note of something else as well. If you scroll down a little farther, you'll see Shallum, the son of Halahesh, who's mentioned, and it says that his daughters made repairs. And I thought that was interesting, because you see mention of things like this from time to time, but I don't feel like it gets the attention it deserves, because that's, again, someone else who really, I would think, would not normally be involved in a construction project, particularly one not as massive or as difficult as rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem. But here they are, they're working with their father to get a section of the wall built. And I thought that was interesting and was a nice, nod that everyone was involved, all sexes, races, backgrounds, all of that. And then we come down a little farther, and you see mention of another group that would be unlikely to be involved. You see Rehum, the son of Bani, who was leading the Levites. Does anybody know who the Levites are? They would have been similar to the priests, exactly. That's really, it's a little more nuanced than that, but that's really the point that I'm getting at, is that they, again, would have been a group that would not normally have been doing this type of work. Another odd group to be involved in the construction of the wall, but yet here they are, and they are involved, and they build a section of the wall as well. And then, of course, the last group I wanted to take a look at was the goldsmiths and the merchants. Again, another group that you wouldn't think would be involved in construction, particularly because it becomes an opportunity cost thing for them, because a merchant back then, what you sold, that was what you lived off of. So they're probably not making a living while they're doing this, and yet they prioritize the building of the wall over their own needs and their own desires. And I thought it was important to note that as well. Did anybody else have any comments about who was working on the wall? Did anybody else notice anything particular about a group or a person mentioned? You're exactly right. You don't see anyone mention whose background or profession is construction. These were just people. And remember, the majority of the people of Israel, well, I say Israel, I think it's Judah, but the majority of the people of Judah are still in captivity. They are still, off in Babylon, and they are being held captive. Some of them have been released, and some of them managed to avoid captivity, the ones that are present. But yeah, so it's just kind of, and I use this term lightly, it's kind of the dregs. It's whoever's left. And yet they are able to get together, the people that are left, they're able to get together and get things done. And it's definitely an important lesson to see that what God is able to do through us and through his people. Okay, so what happens after they build, or after they start building the wall? So you have a list here of the people who are involved. Does anyone know what happens in the next chapter? And I know we haven't read it. I'm just kind of curious. Does anybody know what happens in chapter 4 of Nehemiah? Is anyone familiar with this passage? Okay, well, as is always the case when someone is trying to do the work of the Lord, there are those trying to stop them. So you see in chapter 4, at the beginning, you see a group of people who are ridiculing and mocking the work that's being done. So let's turn over to chapter 4, and let's look at verse 4. And if someone would like to read verse 4 there, they can. Otherwise, I'm happy to read it. But if someone would like to read Nehemiah 4:4. All right. Hear, O our God, how we are despised. Return their reproach on their own heads and give them up for plunder in a land of captivity. Do not forgive their iniquity, and let not their sin be blotted out before you, for they have demoralized the builders. So if you read, verses 1 through 3, it names a couple of people. Tobiah the Ammonite, who we've already mentioned was an enemy of Nehemiah. Him and a couple of others. Sanballat, who was a servant of Artaxerxes as well. You see them mentioned, and they are basically picking on the Jews as they're building the wall. If you read the end of verse 3, even what they are building, if a fox should jump on it, he would break their stone wall down. And as I said, I come from a construction background. I can tell you that when you're new in the construction industry and you're the low guy on the totem pole, everybody picks on you, right? It's a normal thing. Everybody gives you a hard time. That's the industry that we work in. But I can also tell you that it is demoralizing when you're trying to do your job to the best of your ability, and then someone comes along and just basically picks it apart and says, you're doing a terrible job. You're not doing this properly. You need to learn the right way to do it. But they don't actually help or show you the right way to do it. They're just there to tear you down. And that's true across all industries, not just construction as well. And it's particularly true when it comes to the Lord's work. Everyone wants to pick apart how we do the Lord's work, but it seems like very few actually want to do it and want to be involved. And so Nehemiah here is cursing those who are involved in the ridicule of the people of God as they're building the wall. And it says they have demoralized the builders, and I can relate to that, and as I'm sure many of you can. But the cool thing is, if you read down to verse 6, so we built the wall, and the whole wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. This is one of my favorite verses in Nehemiah because this describes the mindset that we as Christians should have towards the work that God has assigned to us, right? We need to have a mind to work. We need to have the desire, and we need to put that desire into action. So I really, this is one of the verses that just stands out to me in Nehemiah. So the workers are demoralized, but they rally and they start putting the wall together and getting it built. Any comments or questions so far? Okay, so as we move on down into chapter 4, these people who have been ridiculing the work that's being done in Nehemiah. Real quick, what time do we normally stop? 15 after. Okay, great. Wonderful. Okay, so the people that have been ridiculing Nehemiah see that what they're doing is not working, and they have a goal. If you read through, you can see they have a goal to keep the wall from being built, right? They don't want to see the work of the Lord done for various reasons. Some of them, like I said, serve King Artaxerxes. They're not really Jews, and so they're not interested in seeing it. Some of them see it as a threat. Nehemiah is accused of wanting to overthrow Artaxerxes, which is just ridiculous, because if you think the Persian Empire at the height of its power, it's ridiculous to think that a group of basically ragtag Jews that are just trying to rebuild their city are going to overthrow this empire, right? But they're accused of that, and so these people want to keep them from rebuilding this city and rebuilding the wall. But the ridicule is not working. Like I say, the people rallied. They had a mind to work. And so what happens next? Does anyone have a thought or a guess? Well, they escalate things. The people building the wall are attacked. The Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Arabs, the Ammonites, here in verse 7, heard that the repair of the walls of Jerusalem went on, and that the breaches began to be closed, and they were very angry. All of them conspired together to come and fight against Jerusalem to cause a disturbance in it. So, and they do. They come against the people of Israel. But Nehemiah's word, and if you read on down into chapter 4, Nehemiah sets up guards and a plan of defense for the people so that they can continue to build the wall while they're being attacked, which again, I think is a tribute to their desire to do the work of the Lord. Not only are they doing a job that they're unaccustomed to doing, they're dealing with ridicule, and now they're dealing with attacks, and they still continue to build. As a matter of fact, there is a verse, if you read on down into chapter 4, it says that they did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. I am thankful that we live in a country where that is not necessary. I understand that there are Christians throughout the world that are in much tougher situations than we are here, but in our country at least, we are relatively free to worship God and to do His work. But here, they are not. I mean, we're talking about threatening bodily harm, threatening death, and they have to literally do their work with sword in hand, as it mentions multiple times towards the end of the chapter. And remember, just like these folks are not construction workers, the majority of these folks are not soldiers either. So they probably don't have the training that would come. I spent some time in the military, and I know some of you have as well. So I would be a little more comfortable, if I had to, in our case, pick up a gun and defend versus while trying to do the work of the Lord. But someone who's never held a weapon before and doesn't know how to use it effectively, I imagine it would be very uncomfortable and probably terrifying to have to rely on a skill set that you don't have. But they did what was necessary anyway. And now we're going to talk about what they accomplished. But before we do that, are there any comments or questions so far?
I was just thinking about one great example of this way too quickly with just multiple situations in our life.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. We do, and particularly, as I said, we live in a relatively free country where, while people might still ridicule us, or they might not want to listen to us as we try to do the Lord's work, but we don't deal with some of the more difficult things. And if you, I know you guys are involved in missionary work overseas, so I'm sure you've heard of the difficulties that go on in these other countries. India being one, for sure, where Christians are hated. In the Islamic world, I know for a fact that you cannot, if you're allowed to go over there as a Christian, you cannot convert. And even in Israel, you cannot legally convert a Jew to Christianity. There, you can be jailed for that. It's a serious offense. And of course, in China, it's illegal to be a Christian. So it is a great example here of what God's people, can accomplish when they set their minds to it, because we are promised that we're going to deal with difficulties, but if we push through, we can accomplish great things. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? So if you read chapter 2, Nehemiah comes back to Jerusalem. He gets permission from Artaxerxes, and he comes back to Jerusalem. And he's kind of sneaky about it, because like I said, there are people that did not want to see this happen, right? But he goes and he sees what needs to be done, and then he gathers the people. And I would imagine he gathered the leaders, because I can't imagine him gathering enough people, as you'll see how big this wall is, to have that many people building that many different sections. I can't imagine you could just gather them in an auditorium. But he gathers them and he says, this needs to be done. We need to do this. This is God's city, and we need to make this happen. So he inspires them, and then they take that and they run with it. So it's a bit of both. They needed the inspiration to get started, but they carry on. Like I said, it says they were disheartened, but then they continued because they had a mind to work. And that's one of those things. There are different kind of traits that humans can have, right? There are taught traits, like you can learn a trade skill and stuff like that. And then there are things that are behavioral that you can't really be taught. A mind to work is one of those things you have to cultivate. It's not one of those things like I can stand here and tell you, well, this is how you have a mind to work, but until you decide that that's what you want to do, I can't teach that to you. And so, yeah, they were definitely willing to do the work. And that is absolutely the case. Several times in between some of the verses that I've read, you see constant prayer. Nehemiah is praying, the people are praying, and you see several times they knew the Lord was with them. And I imagine they would have to, like I said, you have untrained people carrying swords, spears, armor, just hoping, basically, and putting their faith in God that they don't die and that they're able to accomplish the work. So, yeah, I imagine it was a very trying time for them. Any other comments?
Work we're going to do and inviting people to it, and the people who come are not the people who think that's going to do it, and having the faith that God provides it. God provides the people you need, and to go ahead with the work as God has provided it. It is interesting, who shows up. And again, when
when they were taken into captivity, the people who would have been artisans, craftsmen, nobles, all of these people would have been the first to be taken into captivity, the skilled laborers, because Artaxerxes' kingdom, or actually it was Xerxes at the time, can use them, and so the useful, I use that with quotations, the useful people would have been taken into captivity and would not have been allowed back yet. But it's the people, and it seems to always be this way with God. It's the people that you would not think capable of doing this that are called to do it, and that answer. And I think God, knew who was going to answer, who was going to be involved in that. But the invitation is open. You are correct. Nehemiah says, "Hey, this needs to get done." It's kind of like what Isaiah says, who will go? And Isaiah says, "Here I am, send me." And that's the mentality that we need to have. When there is work to be done, we need to be involved. Any other comments, questions? All right. The last thing we're going to cover really quickly. So if you read over to Nehemiah chapter 6 and verse 15. So they go through a lot of trouble over the next couple of chapters, a lot of problems that they encounter with people who don't want the wall built. But you get to Nehemiah chapter 6 and verse 15. So the wall was completed on the 25th day of the month of Elul in 52 days. I'm going to try to give us some perspective on that. So these groups of people, and I don't doubt that there were a lot of them, and there's a lot of people mentioned, hence the fun of reading chapter 3. But they built this wall in 52 days. And just to give you some perspective, they also built the gates, which I think there were 11 that they built that are named, and somewhere around 34 watchtowers, I think, that were built in addition to the wall. But the wall itself is 6.5 feet wide, 2.5 miles long, and 39 feet high. Just to give you some perspective about what these people did, and remember, they didn't have the stuff that we have today where, we can build skyscrapers, we have this great equipment. They built this with their hands. And they did it in 52 days. And it is a massive accomplishment. It's really incredible, almost unbelievable, what they were able to accomplish with the Lord on their side. So, some takeaways from this for us. First, we need to be unified in our purpose. You see these people from the wall, people from all different walks of life, different pasts, different jobs, different ages, sexes, all coming together to get the Lord's work done. And you have to ask, what could we accomplish as Christians if we all got together and just had a mind to work? And that leads me to the second takeaway, which is we need to have a mind to work. We need to first trust in God. We need to pray, and we need to ask for His help. And then we need to follow through with that. We need to work. We need to find something that we can do, and then we need to do it. Any comments or questions? All right. Well, with that being the case, that's all I've got. And we're a few minutes early, but I hope you won't hold that against me.